Hi, Tyzer. Thank you so much for taking this time out today and being a guest in this podcast episode. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. How are you?
Yeah, doing absolutely great. So, yeah, super excited for this episode and get to know more about you. Who do you do? And also pick your brain in today's podcast on leadership and how we can be better leader as well. So, before we get started with that topic, our audience and me would love to know. Who Tyzer Evans is and where you are at the moment and what's your vision is.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I've kind of done a lot of different things. I say I'm a seasoned sales professional, so I've worked for big Fortune 500 companies, where I've had some good track record of being a top producer, either as a manager or producer. I've started several businesses.
Yeah,
I've consulted a bit for businesses, sales wise, but I've spent a lot of time in the insurance space. But I've done e-commerce stuff. So I've been kind of all over the road. I have a podcast myself.
yeah,
So I keep myself busy, help my wife with her business a little bit. So I'm kind of all over the place.
yeah, that's great. How did you get into like the business world? Like, is that something you always wanted to do, or just like came to the circumstance and being a business owner, as entrepreneur?
Yeah. So it was interesting. I grew up in a really small town in Northern California, which is beautiful. I grew up in the wine country,
Yeah.
Sonoma, for people that know it. But the town I grew up in was like 5,500 people, right?
Mm.
So it's more like a village than
Yeah.
than a town. And I just always had like big dreams of getting out and quote unquote making it. And my aunt, she lived in San Francisco at the time and in the movie to San Diego, but she owned her own business. She actually
Right.
had two, and she got to travel the world, and she drove really nice cars, and she just had, it was, besides the stuff that she had, the freedom for her to take off for a month to go travel Europe or
Yeah.
South America. And I was like, wow, that's really hard to do that in a 9 to 5 job, right? So that kind of perked my interest, and so that was always kind of my line of sight as I got older.
Yeah. Interesting. So, like, you built several businesses. Also, like, you teach people their sales process and things like that. How did you come up with the, like a coaching uh, business, like the idea of like teaching other people how to do sales better?
Yeah, so it was really just through managing people, right? So I've flipped 7 sales teams,
Hmm.
and when you're flipping sales teams, it's more cost effective for a company to keep the team that they currently have and just improve on the skill sets that the people are lacking in. And so
Yeah,
I got really good at helping to flip sales teams with the same people. Other people kind of go in, will clean house, and it's a very costly way of doing things. Let's fire
right.
somebody and then bring some on, train them. Um, so as I got started to perfect that skill set more of just kind of coaching people up, it made sense when I started working in the capacity that I have been. I had people ask me, hey, I've
Mhm.
seen what you've done, could you help me out one-on-one? And then I had some exposures to small businesses, and it was the same thing. And then through my wife's, um she she channel networks quite a bit with businesses, and it was more of like an organic, people just kind of coming to me
Yeah,
and me really kind of putting it out there. And then so I said, well, hey man, just throw this out there, throw up a little web page, and people can find me when they want to.
yeah, interesting. So yeah, and today's topic, which is going to discuss about leadership. So obviously, you've been a leader for your company, and you also manage lots of leaders, sales professional, and also like a Fortune 500 company, like you mentioned. So how important is like creating a leader, like organization to take it to next level?
Oh, it's extremely important. Organization is fundamental, but more importantly, making sure that everybody on the team understands their part, right, of the
Yeah,
mission. And this is where a lot of leaders, they don't do a great job. Um, they kind of give obscure goals, or they give you a goal and you don't understand how your goal contributes to the overall maybe
mm,
well-being of the office or the organization. So I think being organized is important, but it's just as important for everybody to be organized and have a clear and defined understanding of how they're contributing to the overall success of the organization and what your mission is you're trying to accomplish.
yeah, yeah, right. So like, is a leader, do you think like is actually born, or like you have to build it in terms of like managing a team and like building a bigger businesses?
Yeah. So like building a bond with your team, is that what you're asking?
No, like the leaders, are they actually born, or like they become someone leader like over time, like working in a corporate organization, or could be like anything, right?
Yeah. I think that I do think there are natural born leaders. To be honest with you, I think that I have a 5 and a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
and I can see that especially my 7-year-old, he really gravitates to taking charge, and
Mhm.
people listen and follow him. That could be obviously nature versus nurture. I think that we encourage him. We talk a lot about
Yeah.
being a leader a lot in our house, right? So I think that he adapts to those qualities. But yeah, you most certainly can improve on your skill set if you're not someone who's naturally born. John Maxwell is one of the favorite people, books that I've read of his, like leadership.
Yeah.
He just put out a new one. The title's escaping me. To learn how to become a better leader. Jocko Willink puts out good stuff. So I definitely think there's skill sets you can improve on, like
Mm.
just something as simple as a lot of leaders want to give direction. But one of the most impactful ways to be a leader is by asking great questions, right? When you
Right.
ask great questions to a quote unquote subordinate and you allow them to come up with the answer for themselves, and it empowers them with confidence.
Mm.
And it's a great way, as opposed to you being irritated or talking down to them or just giving the answer. Um, so yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I definitely think that you can nurture your abilities, and I think that some people, like me, I was a point guard in basketball, I was a quarterback on my high
Yeah.
school football team, so I was always early on in leadership positions, which I think helped me as I got older.
Yeah. It's something like an individual thing, right? If someone have like their desire to be leader, they can do so, even though they're not born to it. There is always room for growth. Like I worked in a like a job and also like the started a business. So I'd never had like a leadership role, and I was bullied in the school and all of them other places. And in a sports wise, I wasn't playing any kind of 10 or 12 team players games. So there is no like that leadership. I was playing badminton most of the time, single or double. So there is no to really need like a leader, like managing the whole team. It's just only two people playing. So when I started a business and everything, then we start managing people. Right now, I've got 30 employees. Also, I had a restaurant business without like a 20 employees as well. So it's eventually like a situation forced me to become a leader and also improve myself and slowly gain there. It just getting started with everything what I'm doing right now. So slowly building my character, building my leadership skills, and learning from each other, like yourself, and we're doing the podcast, asking some questions. And I spoke to a lot of like a business coaches and consultants, also who built multi-million dollar businesses, and learning
Mhm.
from those people. So yeah, it could be like an individual. If someone has the intention to become a better leader, or wants to be a leader, there is always choice. So
Agreed, totally.
yeah, yeah. So in terms of like leadership, we often see like business owners all the time like putting some kind of task on the teams rather than they're doing it and actually they know how to do it and then calling themselves a leader. Is there like do you see the difference between a leader and just like a business owner or like a manager?
Well, I definitely think it helps to gain credibility and buy-in. If your team can
Yeah.
see you doing something, it can be a fine line, especially coming from a sales perspective, right? Because then you get sales managers who get tasked with producing, which sometimes can have a negative impact on
Yeah.
people that are struggling. But I do, great example, the last team that I had taken over when I moved to Houston.
Hmm.
Um, it was a smaller team that I was going to be rebuilding and building up. And yeah, the first thing I did was they had never sat next to me before. I was new to this market. I had moved here from Georgia. And so, it's always interesting, especially if you're a new manager in a new territory.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the team is going to think that your prior success was because you had better rates, or it was a number one off, or it was easier, or you had more support, right? They're going to come up with all these reasons of why you're successful and why you're not going to be able to be successful where they're at. And so I like to take that excuse off of the table. And I do produce usually when I take over a team for the first 6 months to a year to
Hmm.
show them how it can be done and lead the way. So, I didn't do what I did when I was a rep because I didn't have the capacity, still trying to, like you said, organize and put systems and
Yeah.
processes into the office. But I did. I think the first year there, I was our number 4 producer as a manager, and it kind of just showed the team that like, oh, he is the real deal. He can sell, but I wasn't also producing at a point where it was a detriment to people that needed my help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I worked in one of the organization about 7, 8 years back, just a call center in UK, and they from US company, and one of the largest US company, and I was selling like a phone sales. So
Mhm.
there's like a lots of leaders in there, like teaching a lot of things. A lot of people came from the US to teaching us like how to make sales call and etc. And we still like a lot of leaders like actually doing it while actually telling us to do. So like they on the phone and telling them how to close the deal, how to make the call, how to start the conversation, and how to like follow through and everything. So from there, like I learned like that there is a lot of things like actual real leader is like they actually been through like what you are actually
Mhm.
asking you to do, and they know exactly like how to make the impact. And right now we see a lot of like small business owners, they have no skill set on certain things, and they managing their team, which is great. Like all the time, like you need to hire someone like above you. But at the same time, you need to like manage their skill set in terms of like to get the great ROI. So it's not about the like micromanaging their task or anything like that. It's all about like how you put through a certain employees on a certain position to get best out of them. The same with in sports, right? If you
Mhm.
play baseball, I don't really follow baseball. I can give you an example on a cricket. It's similar to this one. Which bowler to use, which end, the beginning of it, and the middle of it, or like the end of the understanding their strength. In the same way, like in business, we can use it in the same person, like which person is really good on negotiating, which person is really greater, like bringing in new deals, which person is really good at like customer services. So you putting them in place, like it building a good structure. So how important this thing is, like managing actual team in leadership.
Oh, putting in structure into place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that really goes back to kind of what I was first saying is that oftentimes, especially if you're managing a larger team where you're dealing with like service people or sales people or HR people, you want to make sure that everyone really understands the overall arching mission, right? A lot of
Mm,
times companies make mission statements and they have company slogans or they have core values, but it's like a check the box type thing
yeah.
where like they're just in your employee manual, they cover them the first day, and then you never talk about them again, which I think is a real mistake. I think that if you are an entrepreneur and you've made a company with a reason and for a purpose, that needs to be in your ethos of what you do every day, and everybody on your team organizationally needs to know how they're contributing to that. And the
Yeah.
example I always give is that there was a reporter team that was at NASA here in Houston, and they were walking around interviewing people on the different jobs they did at the NASA Space Center. And they came over to the janitor and they asked her, what do you do? And she said, I send people to space. Right? She had a very clear and defined mission that although her job was not an astronaut, that
Yeah.
her keeping the facilities clean as possible was allowing other people to do their job best as possible. And the whole overall arching mission was to get a man on the moon, right? And so I think that if companies come from that type of perspective, where that everybody's understands I need to accomplish X so we can do Y as a company, and you're just very transparent. Because what happens too is when you start to build hierarchies within an organization,
Yeah.
it becomes secretive. And that's, one of the things that it's always bothered me the most about working for Fortune 500 companies or even Fortune 100 companies that I work for is that the more hierarchy, the more levels, the more of like cloud accuracy. And there's not great transparency down to the ground troops, which then becomes you get some type of, I wouldn't say resentment, but discontentment where they don't understand why they can't be told things. And then things that come from the top down, people are taken back by surprise. And then you get, and that's where you start to create a type of toxicity in your culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So, what do you think, like, as a great leader, what type of like qualities they should have in terms of like managing the larger team? I see you working in that sales.
I mean, for me, it's always just being really clear, have clear and defined expectations, always inspect what you expect,
Yeah.
have fun, be direct, understand your people. One of the first things I always do with any team is I sit down and I have them list out 3 to 5 personal and professional goals. And then we
Mhm.
draw a roadmap for their goals. Because for me, I want to know my people. I want to know what makes them tick. Now, not everybody's
Yeah.
driven by money, and so some people are driven by freedom or time off, and so I want to help them achieve their professional goals, but also understands for me how to motivate them.
Yeah.
So I think those are some key core values for me as being a leader.
Yeah. That's great. Like you have to have like a certain qualities in terms of like being a leadership, and people can actually call you leader, right? It's not like a randomly someone can just call themselves a leader and have like any kind of like a qualities. There is no vision, there is no mission statement, like where we're heading in terms of like a company wise, since we are talking
Right.
about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
bosses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That leads to like a second question, which is like we oftentimes like a boss around and we think like we can do everything rather than like a delegation, like a delegating to like a certain task to like our employees or trusting them in a way, like making some kind of decision for the organization or company. And why is it like so important for delegation to building a, like a big company, a big culture within? Because right now, like with during the COVID, we seen like a lot of small businesses started, and those people like didn't have any kind of like experiences, prior experiences like starting a business and don't know how to lead a team. Or probably they've seen like the exponential growth on their company, started the e-commerce business or something like that. And they don't know how to delegate certain things. They think I'm need to do the and I have to keep an eye on this. And rather than focusing on the growth and sales, they're focusing on small
Mhm.
tasks. So how important is the delegation and how to delegate certain tasks to your employees?
Oh, it's everything, right? Especially when you're talking about scaling.
Yeah, yeah,
And you see a lot of business owners, they love the idea of scaling, but they're such control freaks because this is
yeah,
their baby, right? This is their business. And so they have a really hard time not overseeing every aspect. But I think this is where you have to start to identify what is your genius. And,
mm,
and a lot of people talk about this, but I believe it's true. You're really good at 1 or 2, maybe 3 things if you're lucky.
yeah,
And then as an entrepreneur, you need to double down on that and all the things you don't enjoy doing or you're not good at to delegate out. And you brought up, key word. And when you
yeah,
delegate, you have to do it to entrust your people, right? And people know when you trust them. And the more
sure,
that they feel trusted and empowered, the more they're going to go beyond to meet or exceed your expectations. And this is what people don't realize is that when you empower somebody, they want to do well, right? They
yeah,
want to meet expectation. And too many leaders, they cripple people by not empowering them and babysitting them. And I think maybe because I was lucky, I got into my first big leadership position when I was 27,
mm-hmm.
and I was managing people that were 20 and 30 years older than me.
Right,
And so I had to come from a place of, you know what? They have kids that are older than me, right?
yeah,
Like they've lived life. I don't need to coddle them. I don't need to micromanage them. They know
mm-hmm.
this job better than me. So it really allowed me to take a step back and go, how can I support you? How can I help you? And then just do that,
Yeah.
and then maybe try to show them weaknesses or areas of improvement. But it was not my job to go in there and reinvent the wheel. And so that just taught me a valuable lesson early on to trust and empower people.
Yeah, by micromanaging to your employees, like whoever your team is, like the main problem is the creativity stops for them. So they thinking
Mhm.
outside of the box. They can't really think straight and clear because they're constantly worrying about like, or if I don't do my task right, or if I don't meet my
Right.
expectation, like I might lose my job. And they
Right.
probably wandering around like this is no great culture to be in, or looking for a different kind of job. So they
Yep.
focus on what that task is or whatever the job they're doing. And eventually your great leaders and great team members like leading your organization because the main leader is not like farming them well in terms of like how you keeping your team members. So how important do you think is like a leaders need to get some training or like learn from like other great leaders so they can implement it on their organization. It could be like, I'm not talking about a big organization. We have nearly 10,000 listeners, like entrepreneurs on this podcast. And they could be like a small to medium sized business owners, managing 10, 20 people, probably 100 people, employees. And some people, they don't believe in training. They don't believe in like you need to train your team or leaders in terms of like you can grow. Could be like a sales organization. How important do you think is like a hire a coach or leaders or learn from someone like who can actually teach you how to be a better leader?
Well, what's that saying? If you're the smartest person in the room, then you need to find a new room.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's extremely important that you're always continuing to invest in yourself and your skill set. Like there's no such thing as a perfect leader. There's no such thing as a perfect person. We're all evolving all the time. I mean, for me, I just think that that's what we're here for. I mean, personally, like, why we're on planet Earth is about growth and expansion. And so I think the more that you can do that for yourself, the more it's going to benefit your team. I would never encourage somebody to say, hey, you've got all the skill sets you're ever going to need, and you don't need to develop it. I think it's absolutely continuing to learn and tweak because, especially we're generationally now we're dealing with a whole new generation.
Yeah.
And so, the Gen Xers need to learn how to deal with the Gen Zs, the boomers had to learn how to deal with us millennials. Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to continue to develop your skill set. And for me, people thought I was crazy. I just think it's so important. I have a meeting every day for my sales team, 8 to 8:30, because it's about getting on the same page and aligning your mission and having some type of training weekly, right? So sometimes it's just like, hey guys, here's what we need to do for the day. Other times we'll role play. Other times we might watch a motivational video. Other times we'll bring on a sales consultant to talk about how to leave a proper voicemail. I just think that training should be constant. Maybe not every day, but definitely every week.
Yeah, definitely. And there is like a most important thing, like hire someone like yourself, like teach them in a manner way, like how you can improve your sales, how you can improve the way the tone of voice you use, like a lot of simple details in there. Is like unless like you hired a coach, you wouldn't know exactly. Like I'm working with it, like I mentioned earlier, like working in the call center before that, like I was thinking like is some random dude is calling me and trying to sell something, right? But there is like a different way you can do that. The tone of voice you use, the word you use, the language you're using, like when to ask what certain question to closing some certain deals without like someone training you or you have like a certain experience, you wouldn't know exactly like how it can make your closing ratio is better and higher. So yeah, it like you mentioned is really important for like a get trainer and learn from like other leaders to achieve the goals. So we are running out of time this podcast. So if someone wants to like start working with you in the sales coaching, what's the process like in terms of like working with the leaders and the sales coach?
Yeah, so you could reach out to me on my website, which is tyzerevans.com. Usually set it up so we meet once a week for about 3 months. Kind of get you set up with scripts, voicemails, things that you can work tangibly, do some role playing, work out, look at your metrics, understanding where you might be having a missing link. Because oftentimes, right, it's not just like an A to B sales process. Sometimes there's going to be several stages. Every stage is going to have a conversion ratio. So breaking that down, finding where you're missing, and then just tweaking your skills. A lot of times it's interesting. It can be something just as simple as someone's just not asking for the business, right? They're doing everything right. They're just simply not asking for the sale. And then just kind of improving from there. So yeah, normally I think 90 days is a great amount of time. And to your point, if you don't have a coach, it's hard to coach other people. Like I have an RTA syndicate with Ed Milet and Andy Frisella, right? So I do that once a week with them. And then I joined another one called Contrarian Thinking out of Austin here in Texas. So it's like I feel like I have coaches, right? I have mentors. And so I think it's important that it doesn't matter what level you're at, you should always be looking to find that next person that's at the next level.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So like, do you have any kind of social media platform, like if anyone wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can so my website's a great place. You can find all of my links. I'm probably most active though on Instagram, and all of my social media is just Tyzer Evans. So Tyzer Evans EVNS. You can find me at Tyzer Evans at any platform.
Yeah, thank you so
So
much.
yeah, please reach out.
Yeah, definitely. So, Triza, thank you so much for coming to the show and sharing with us your valuable lesson. And thank you so much for your time. So, I wish you good luck with the 2022. I hope you meet all of your business goals and your life goals, and wish you best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
You're welcome, Triza. So, yeah, that's a wrap, guys. So, you know how to find Tyzer Evans. Go check out his social media platform and also his website if you want to reach out to him, want to work with him. And yeah, till then, stay safe, stay healthy. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone.